I think that Harry and Meghan were much maligned. The press and the palace combined together to set the public up against them, to make William and Kate look better, and because there was too much glory going on to them. Do you remember the actual joy after that wedding, where everybody loved them, and that couldn't be allowed to continue because the royal line of succession must continue. The big machine, the big carriage has to go on. I can't imagine that Harry and Meghan would give up their life in California. Why should they? They have a very, very good life. But they can do an enormous amount of good. Because, look at Harry's Invictus Games. Look at and actually, it's always blame the woman, isn't it? So Meghan gets Meghan has copped it from the start, and I think she has a genuine connection with women and with people, and she's a very smart woman. And you were talking about how they spilled all the royal secrets. That there are plenty of royal secrets to come out, believe me, which they didn't spill.
Harry's Spare. The truth behind the book that shook the palace. Let's set the record straight once and for all, shall we? Harry did not sell family secrets in Spare. Full stop. What he actually did was correct the relentless stream of lies that had been printed about him and Meghan. Lies that went unchallenged, uncontested, and frankly unchecked for years. He didn't drag his Uncle Andrew's well-documented disasters into the spotlight, didn't spill his father's dirty laundry, and certainly didn't go rummaging through William's closet of skeletons. And yet here we are, with William apparently losing his mind over a book that, in hindsight, looks positively tame compared to everything we now know. Tame. Meanwhile, Charles and William are out here charging rent to the NHS, letting people live in mouldy, crumbling apartments and quietly pocketing duchy money like the world's most entitled landlords. But sure, Harry writing about his own lived experience is the real scandal. William needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror, seek some genuine help, and frankly, pipe down. It sounds like what the monarchy really needs is a good old-fashioned sucker to keep funding their schemes. And, lucky for them, Wee Willie fits that bill just perfectly. Harry's Restraint in Spare. Why William needs to sit down and shut up. Let's get one thing crystal clear. Harry did not sell family secrets in Spare. Despite having access to a treasure trove of sensitive information that would make even the most seasoned royal correspondent's jaw drop, he chose Restraint. What he actually did was correct the relentless stream of lies and misinformation that had been printed about him and Meghan. And honestly, who could blame him for that? He said nothing about Uncle Andrew's spectacular scandals, nothing about the darker secrets lurking behind palace walls involving his father or his brother. Nothing. And now, with everything that has since come to light, Spare looks positively tame by comparison. So, before William starts clutching his pearls and playing the wounded victim, perhaps he ought to take a long, hard look in the mirror. Because charging rent to the NHS and renting out mouldy apartments to vulnerable people while crying about a memoir is a very special kind of audacity. Harry didn't expose the family. He defended himself. There's a rather enormous difference, and it's frankly exhausting that this still needs to be spelled out. Harry told his truth. While William and Charles count their coins, while the media clutches its pearls over Harry daring to correct the record about himself and Meghan, let's take a moment to talk about what William and Charles are actually getting up to, shall we? These are the same royals who are charging the NHS rent to use royal properties. Yes, the very health service that kept Britain alive through a pandemic, while simultaneously renting out substandard, mould-riddled apartments to tenants who deserve far better. That's not exactly the picture of noble public service they'd like the tabloids to paint, is it? It sounds less like a monarchy committed to the people and more like a pair of landlords squeezing every last penny out of whoever needs the most, prioritising profit over any genuine sense of duty or decency. So before anyone wants to point fingers at Harry for having the audacity to tell his own story, maybe take a long, hard look at what the so-called dignified royals are doing with their properties and their power. Because renting mouldy flats to vulnerable people while billing the NHS doesn't exactly scream sacrifice and service. Now, does it? Harry's Spare was never the royal exposé. They claimed it was what Harry actually did in Spare was share his own story. His mental health battles, his grief, his struggles with royal life. The kind of deeply personal reckoning that takes genuine courage to put on paper. He corrected the outright lies and fabricated narratives that had been plastered across tabloid front pages about both himself and Meghan, because frankly, someone had to. And here's what's telling. For all the pearl-clutching and howling about betrayal, Harry didn't breathe a single word about Uncle Andrew's catastrophic scandals, didn't air his father's well-documented dirty laundry, and certainly didn't go digging into whatever William has tucked away in his closet. He kept his focus squarely on his own lived experience. Now, with everything that's come to light since, Spare reads almost quaint by comparison, practically a bedtime story. So, the next time William feels the urge to clutch his pearls and lecture Harry about discretion, perhaps he ought to sit down, reflect on the mouldy apartments and the NHS rent-grabbing, and consider that Harry showed considerably more restraint than he's ever been given credit for. Harry kept the real secrets. Spare was just the tip of the iceberg. And let's not forget what Harry say. For all the pearl-clutching and hand-wringing from the palace crowd about Harry selling family secrets, the man left an absolute mountain of material untouched. He said nothing, not a single word, about Uncle Andrew's catastrophically embarrassing scandals, which have done far more damage to the monarchy's reputation than anything Harry ever wrote. He stayed quiet about the genuinely damaging secrets surrounding his father Charles, the rent gouging, the cash for honours whispers, the murky financial dealings that would make anyone's eyes water. And as for William, Harry could have gone there, really gone there, but he didn't. Whatever controversial skeletons rattle around in Willie's particular closet remained firmly shut away. Harry simply told, correcting the deliberate lies and smears printed about Meghan and himself. That's it. That's the whole betrayal. When you stack Spare up against everything that has since come to light about this family, it doesn't just look tame, it looks positively restrained. The ones screaming loudest about secrets being spilled might want to ask themselves why they're so terrified of what's been said yet. Spare, truth-telling, not secret-selling. Let's get one thing straight. When you actually stop and think about what Harry included in Spare, it's remarkably tame compared to what we now know swirls around the rest of that family. He didn't breathe a word about Uncle Andy and his deeply troubling associations, didn't spill the dirty secrets of Charles and his dodgy financial dealings, and certainly didn't go after William with anything close to what William arguably deserves. What Harry actually did was correct the flat-out fabrications that the media had been gleefully printing about him and Meghan. Lies that went largely unchallenged and uncorrected for years. So spare us the pearl-clutching about betrayal, because if anything, the book is positively restrained. The ones out here truly cashing in on their positions are Charles and William, charging rents to the NHS and renting out mouldy apartments like a pair of glorified slumlords hiding behind a crown. Harry told his truth, and given everything we now know about the real scandals festering within that institution, Spare looks less like a bombshell and more like a mildly, strongly worded letter. The pot calling the kettle. Gold-plated. Let's talk about the sheer brass neck of the royal family, criticising Harry for airing dirty laundry when their own hands are anything but clean. Charles has been quietly raking in cash by charging extortionate rents to the NHS and leasing out crumbling, mould-ridden properties to vulnerable tenants. Hardly the behaviour of a family that claims to exist purely in service to the public. William, meanwhile, benefits enormously from a public position that funds his every need, yet demands an ironclad wall of privacy the moment anyone dares to question him. The double standard is breathtaking. These are people who profit handsomely from the monarchy's public-facing brand, the pageantry, the palaces, the endless media coverage, and then turn around and cry foul when one of their own decides to set the record straight. Harry didn't drag Uncle Andrew's sordid affairs into the spotlight, didn't expose the darker corners of his father's past, and didn't go anywhere near William's most uncomfortable secrets. What he did was correct outright lies that were being printed about him and Meghan. And if is considered a betrayal, then perhaps the royal family should take a long, hard look in the mirror before lecturing anyone else about accountability. Harry's Spare. Truth, restraint, and the integrity. William wishes. He had what's telling about Harry's approach in Spare is that he didn't go scorched earth when he absolutely could have. He chose selective disclosure, correcting the outright lies that had been printed about him and Meghan, rather than blowing the whole rotten house down. Think about what he say. Not a word about Uncle Andy's spectacular disgrace. Not a whisper about the dirtier chapters of Charles's story. Not a syllable about whatever William's been getting up to behind closed doors. Given what we now know about the wider family's behaviour, Spare reads like a restrained, almost polite memoir by comparison. Harry had the receipts, had the ammunition, and chose not to pull the trigger on the big stuff. That's not the behaviour of someone selling family secrets. That's someone prioritising truth over sensationalism, correcting a record that had been deliberately dirtied, and doing so with more dignity than the institution ever extended to him. The irony being, of course, that the louder William shouts about betrayal, the more people start wondering what exactly he's so worried Harry might say next.